I have Ian Johnson live. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Man, I am ecstatic to say the least. I'm just really, really, really excited to have you on board. Very, very lucky and like I'm like a kid. So super excited to have you on board. It's been a long day of work. It feels like a long week already. Uh, it's just it's just great to have you on. So with that, what have you been doing? What are you up to today?
So even though this whole quarantine thing happened, my life really hasn't changed because I'm usually in my shop alone. So I basically I still get up, come to the shop every day, and I work. We got pushed back a little bit with our Motor Trend shoot, but that's actually going to get picked up next week. So we'll be back filming because it got released now. But yeah, I just been working, cutting, grinding. We changed how we bring in my guys to film for Amazon, and then so I had like a videographer in here one day a week, and then doing a bunch of live stream stuff for a few companies that we do a lot of work for. So we've been doing a live stream for Yukon and ESOB the past month, pretty much every week, which has been fun. Been fun for sure.
Let me ask this right out of the gate. You have your Motor Trend show and you have a show on Amazon. Are they separate from each other?
Yep. Yeah. So I started the Amazon show. Started the streaming show and the Amazon show right out of the gate, and then working with Facebook Watch and YouTube Red and a couple other streaming services. And then Motor Trend just sort of came out of the blue, and they were like, "Hey, would you want to do four-wheeler TV?" And originally I was like, "No, because you're going to make me sign some big crazy contract. I don't want to do that." And but they were super cool with it. They were like, "Nope, we just want you to do this off-road show for us. You know, four-wheeler TV used to be big. We think it can come back." And then it worked out even better, because then we started talking about it. We had some back and forth here and there, and then they knew I was building this shop because they saw the post I was making on social media, and they just sort of said, "Hey, what if we just rented like half of your shop and turned it into the four-wheeler studio?" So I was like, "That's perfect." So half of my shop is four-wheeler, and the other half is where we film Big Tire Garage. So yeah, it worked out really, really well. The Big Tire Garage stuff, it's different. It's one vehicle build, start to finish. Every episode is right around like 8 to 10 minutes long, and it's different. The four-wheeler stuff is more vehicles, more fast-paced, 30-minute traditional television show. So it's fun to get to do both all at the same time.
Yeah. So let me just say this. I don't come from a mechanical background at all. Don't come from cars or anything. I actually, when I was 16, I got a Jeep and, obviously put like a rough country lift on it and put ugly mud tires on. Everybody's first mistake they ever made. Look, nothing against rough country and some ugly mud tires, but we've all been there, and there's always better. So, yes, ma'am.
How do you make a YouTube video?
Here, come here. So this is my lovely 6-year-old stepdaughter who was bothering me on how to make a YouTube video.
How to make a YouTube video?
All right, go. But one thing, everyone who has kids understands exactly what's going on.
Yep, exactly.
But one thing that I found was I was flipping through Spike TV on a Sunday, and I found your show, and I watched all of the power block that they used to call it. I watched all of it, and I think you're the only person I've ever been able to sit down and watch a show about something mechanical like that, and they did it right. The flow, everything, it just clicks. And obviously, I think that's something you had to work at, and I'm sure it got better as time went on because you're still doing it now. And how do you go about kind of framing yourself to a point where you can teach people? How do you teach people about mechanics that don't know? Because in all reality, you taught me a lot more than you probably would even imagine.
Well, probably the easiest answer to that is because I was a teacher before I was a TV guy. So I taught high school auto shop for 7 years before I started working in television. Yeah. So I think that was part of it, right? Because when you're teaching high school kids, you got to keep it entertaining, or they're not going to stick around, and you got to make complicated processes. And this is anything, whether it's English or math or science or shop. You have to take complex items and distill it down into small, digestible chunks. And so that just I think that definitely helped me transition easy into a how-to television. And then also I love the whole genre. Like I don't want to be Brad Pitt. I don't want to be Jeremy Clarkson. I don't want to be one of those guys. I want to be Norm Abram. I want to be the guy that shows you how to build something. And I just happen to be working in television. So I've been fortunate that I've never kind of like been, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go make a movie or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been happy with what I've been able to do. And I think so teaching helped, and then also just sort of finding that niche and really liking it. And I think that sort of helped out a lot too, for sure. But I appreciate you saying that you learned a lot. I think that's the best part. I'll get, especially when social media sort of took off, you know, because social media is newer than we like to think, right? It feels like it's been around forever. But, you know, 2006, 7, 8 is when it started to really get busy and big. And sort of to basically have people constantly send me messages and say, hey, thanks to you, I built this Jeep, or I knew how to weld this thing. I love that, because that's super cool. So I think it's great. It's a great way to make a living, no questions asked. You know, being a tradesperson is awesome, and it's also a great way to spend your time too. It's a great way to spend time with your family too.
Yeah. So there's one thing I love about the fact of, you know, your career as a host on these TV shows is you've covered every single type of car and every single type of rig and every level of budget. I mean, you've hit every angle. So it's been awesome to watch. But where would you say, you know, let me ask this. Where would you say was your favorite time period where you were working on your favorite projects and everything just felt right? Is it now, or was it in the past?
No, it's whenever I'm building what I'm building right now, when it's like at that point where it's starting to look like a vehicle. That's where I get super excited, right? So like right now, back through that door, that right there, I'm working on my 53 Willys wagon, and that project, I've had it forever. I've had it for like 4 or 5 years, and I kept putting it off, and I had ways I wanted to build it, and it changed a few times. But it's at the point right now where it's like, you know, I just basically bought a shell. And so now the floors are back in it. It's sitting on the chassis. The suspension's under it. The tires are under it. It looks like a car. That's my favorite part right there. And that to me is like, and then also, I think I also like when I'm doing something I've never done before. So like on this wagon, I'm doing like a whole bunch of bodywork stuff that I normally would completely shy away from. I'm not that type of person who can like put in patch panels, and because I hate when you stitch weld that stuff together and it looks like, you know, dog poo, and then you grind it all off. My brain could never get there. But I spent a lot of time the past couple of years with my buddy Kevin Tates, and seeing him take like what looks like hammered dog crap, grind on it, put a little filler on it, and then paint. It looks gorgeous. So now I'm kind of like, you know what? I kind of got to push past that and do some body work. So on this one, it's like a full hot rod. You know, we've done all these patch panels in it. It's got custom body mods and all this stuff that I normally wouldn't do, and that, which is kind of cool because I've been doing this for like almost 30 years now, building cars. So to do something that I've never done before, I think that's my favorite part. Is when you find something new to learn, that's the best part of the whole thing, I think.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there's so much to it. When you start like I did from an absolutely clean slate, I was 16, total green pasture, had no idea. I'm now 25, and the only way I've learned how to do most of what I do now is I've broken everything, and you have to take it apart and put it back together. So that's a big help.
Best way to learn. This is the best way to learn.
Yeah. What would you say was the hardest thing, the hardest like trial that you went through in terms of learning how to do one specific thing? I mean, obviously there's skills that you learn throughout a lifetime, but it was the one that's just rough.
Yeah. So I bought an 85 Jeep CJ7. I think I bought it when I was like 17 or 18 years old, and I put a big old motor in it, which was a huge mistake. And same as you, I did all the wrong things. I did sprung over on 35s with an AMC 20 in the back. It was terrible. It was terrible decisions. Ruined that Jeep. And basically, and then it had a great 258 straight six, but I didn't like that. I wanted a V8 underneath the hood. So I put a 360 in it, and it just destroyed transmissions on a weekly basis. And it was, but the good thing about that truck was at the time I hated it because every time I drove it, I'd burn up the transmission, no questions asked. But at the same time, I couldn't afford to pay someone to rebuild it. And I was going through college to be a mechanic, so I figured I should build it myself. And But even when I was at my college, I talked to my teachers. They'd be like, "Hey, can you help me rebuild this transmission?" And they didn't know how to do it. And so I had to learn myself. So I rebuilt that transmission, I think like 13 or 15 times before it actually stayed together. But the good thing is at the time, it was such a pain in the ass, and it was the trials and tribulations of just the fight of getting that Jeep to move forward. You fast forward like 5 years when I finished my apprenticeship and write my mechanics license, a job opened up as a transmission specialist at the dealership I was working at, and it was like a no-brainer. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go be a transmission guy. And that helped me basically write my ticket. I could ask any price I wanted to work at any dealership because nobody wanted to work on transmissions. And then that segued into doing drive lines and transfer cases and front axles and rear axles. And that's sort of how I've paid the bills, I guess, for many, many years now. So even though it was just a backbreaker at the time, and you look back on it now, it's like, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be where I am today. So that I think is the best way to look at it.
I would agree with you. And it's so funny. If I had to pick something that's probably the most intimidating, it would probably be transmissions. So I rightfully believe your answer there.
Well, when I was deciding what specialty I wanted at the dealership, I wanted to be an engine guy, but the engine guy, it was a big GM dealership, and the engine guy told me, don't be an engine guy. I just put crate motors in. That's all I do all day long. The short blocks come in and I put them in. That's all I do. And he said, the only people who rebuild anything anymore are transmission guys. Be a transmission guy and you'll be able to write. And he was right, because nobody knew how to work on a transmission. I had guys who've been working as mechanics for 20 years, and they were scared of them. And so it was great. I mean, I was like 19 years old, and I could basically, when the other transmission guy went on vacation, I could walk into the boss's office and ask for a raise, and there was no question. Just because they're like, yep, because they had to get the transmissions done by Friday, and it was great. So yeah, it's a great specialty to have for sure.
So tell me a little bit about the arc where you have skipped your way all the way to where you are now in your career, because you said you started a dealership and now you're TV host on two different huge shows. So tell me, fill in the details.
So it was pretty like lucky in a way. So I graduated high school, and I knew I wasn't going to go to college, university, or to be a doctor, a lawyer, and that. So I knew I was going to be a mechanic. I knew that when I was like 16 years old. So I started working my way, got my apprenticeship done, wrote my license, got my license, and then I was working as a mechanic. And then a few years in as a mechanic, probably about 6-7 years in, I was kind of getting that 7-year itch. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but my parents were teachers. And they always had the summers off. And I was like, man, I love summer. I hate winter. Sure would be great if I didn't have to work in the summer. And so I called my mom up, and I was like, hey, can I be a teacher, a shop teacher? And she's like, yeah, you can. You just have to do this, this, this. And you can, go back to school for a year and get your teaching degree, and you'll be on your way. And you should do it now because there's a shortage of shop teachers because they're all retiring. So that's what I did. I became a shop teacher. And did that for same thing, 6-7 years. And I was sitting at home watching TV with my wife. I think we'd only been married for maybe a year. And this TV show came on called Monster Garage. And I watched it. And at the end of the show, it said, apply to be on the show. And so I went and I applied on the internet to be on the show. And 2 weeks later, I was in Long Beach, California, filming a Monster Garage episode. And I stayed friends with all the production guys from that shoot. We're still friends today. And I was back home, and about 6-8 months later, one of them called me up and he's like, hey, do you watch this thing called Power Block? And I was like, yeah, I watch trucks and hot rod TV every weekend. Of course I do. And he said, they're going to be looking for a host. The commercial's going to air this weekend. You should apply. And so I watched it, and sure enough, the commercial came out. I just, once again, applied online. And I kind of got I got shortlisted because I'd done TV before. That was kind of like the first question, right? Have you been on TV before? And so they flew a bunch of us into Nashville. They had 5,000 applicants. They flew us all into Nashville, and they said, we did a couple screen test things, and then literally I flew home thinking, there's no way I'm going to get this job. And 2 weeks later, we were starting to shoot the first episode of Extreme. So it was that fast. And it was all just right place, right time kind of thing, 100%.
That's amazing. Is that why you ended where you are? You know you're in the Nashville area.
What's that? I didn't hear you.
Is that why you landed where you are now? Because I know that you're in Tennessee, you're in that Nashville area.
Yeah, so RTM Productions that hosted Extreme, which created Extreme 4x4, they were based out of Nashville because the guy who started the company, Joe St. Lawrence, when he started it, there was only like 3 cable companies in the whole country, and one of them was this small little cable company called the Nashville Network, which would broadcast out what happened at the Grand Ole Opry every weekend, and then just filled in stuff around that. And he knew that, if he came to Nashville, he was from New York. He knew if he came to Nashville and made TV here, that he could be on that network very easily because they were always just looking for shows to be on that network. And then that was pre-cable TV. That was back when everything was going out over antennas. And then when cable took off, he was just same thing, right place, right time. And they were, these cable companies just wanted more and more channels, and one of them swallowed up TNN. And then that became Spike TV, and so that just all landed in this Nashville area. And then so we moved down here for the show, and we've been down here ever since. We've bought property down here for the new studios and put the new studios up on it, and it's a good place. I like it. It's a good spot. It's a good place to live. It's there's not real winter, but there's still a little bit of a winter, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah. So where are you from originally? That'll help key in on the winter comment there.
So originally, I'm from Canada. I'm from Ontario, Canada. I grew up in Ontario, born there in a small little town called Smiths Falls, Ontario, which is just outside Ottawa, where it's like, people always ask, how cold does it get? When does it get cold? And I had a motorcycle I used to ride, and I used to tell people, you always put the motorcycle away on Thanksgiving, which in Canada is in early October, and then you get it out on June 1st. So that's winter. So that's a long winter. It's great. It's great if you like winter, but I never liked winter. I always hated winter. So
yeah. So I'm actually, I actually don't think I'm too far from you. I'm actually in Murfreesboro. So I'm just a skip, hop, and a jump away. And I know that, I've seen you did some recent travels kind of around this area on a little expedition. Adventure Off-Road Park's always been a good park. Wooley's Off-Road is always a good park. I know that those were some that the shows used very often. Now that you've made kind of this area, the Southeast, this Tennessee area, your home and, your primary wheeling spot, how does it compare when you go out to a Moab or a Johnson Valley? What do you think, do you ever have that, man, maybe I should live here?
So when I go to Moab, I get that feeling occasionally. And then I do like the Southwest. That's where my son's in college. He's down in Tucson. Well, not now. He's back home, but he goes to school in Tucson. I love the Southwest. I think it's absolutely beautiful. My wife and I talked about moving to the Southwest, but there's that whole lack of water thing that might happen in a few years. So we kind of planned against that. But for doing what I do, this area is perfect. So I love going out west. I would not want to have to run a television production company that specializes in off-roading out west, because whenever you start playing around on government land and you want to film on it, it's a nightmare. It's permits, and it's BLM advisors, it's extra people you have to take with you. It's much more complicated than just, popping over to AOP and killing some hills with a camera crew for the afternoon. So it does make it a lot harder to do that. But, I love both areas, especially with the wheeling. I think it's fun. I don't get caught up in this, which one's harder, because they're all completely different. But it is fun to be able to travel around the country and go wheeling for sure.
We live in a really unique place where we can have so many different versions of terrain all within a driving, a couple days drive. So
yeah, and I mean that when my son was picking what college to go to, that's what I told him. I'm like, dude, this is the best part. The people who are like in Canada, you don't have a choice. You could go to Vancouver, British Columbia, where it rains all the time like Seattle, or you're in just the same climate. It's cold in the winter and hot in the summer. That's your only options. And Whereas, when you get in the States, it's like if you like mountains, you go to Colorado. If you like desert, you go to Arizona. If you like fishing, you pop up to Maine. Like that's the coolest part about this country. The geography in this country just is amazing. That's what I love. I drive across this country at least 2 times a year for different wheeling trips, and everyone kind of laughs at me. They're like, "Why would you drive?" Like we drove out to King of the Hammers. And they're like, "Why would you drive to King of the Hammers?" I'm like, that's the best part. I love driving across the country because it's so awesome to see all those different areas.
So I'm going to loop back to King of Hammers because I want to pick your brain about some things and get your take on this year. But before we go there, so you primarily build full-size rigs. Just in the past, you've built a couple of side-by-sides, and I want to ask you about the side-by-sides first.
Yep.
It doesn't seem like the side-by-side is your vehicle of choice.
Why?
Okay.
It's because of the price point. It's the price point to get into it. So it's the same reason why I don't even own a JK. And I still have trouble justifying buying a JK. I can buy a JK now because it's like I can find
10 years after.
$8-9 grand,
Yeah.
For me, it's the I don't understand for the way I build a rig, for me to like go out and spend like $25,000 on a vehicle to then put another $25,000 into it. My brain can't get there. So I'm normally shopping for like vehicles that are like, $1,000, $5,000 because I'm going to replace 90% of it anyway. And that's just sort of how I am. I think side-by-sides are cool. I love driving them and I think they're fun. I think they are a great part of our sport because it gives people that instant gratification of getting out in the dirt without having to, spend a year building a Jeep and then go wheeling, So I think it has introduced a lot of people to our sport, which I think is great. But no, the main reason the side-by-side is not my number one go-to vehicle is just that cost to get in, that initial purchase. I don't know you can finance them, but that's just not my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. I had a 2-door JK on coilovers and like had fully blown it out. What would you say, like sensation wise, when you're driving a full size vehicle on live axles, big tires, everything? Does that sensation compare to what you get in a side by side if you're just trail riding in general, or is it just two completely different beasts?
I think it's two completely different things. So the best way I can describe it is I had a side by side once on the show. We had a Polaris 1K. I think it was when it first came out. We built one for a giveaway, and it was funny because I went out to Woolies and rode around, and it was fun. We had a great time. And then the very next day, I said to my son, I'm like, "Hey, let's go wheeling." So I grabbed one of the 2 buggies, and I said, "Let's go to Woolies, and I want to drive it and see if it feels the exact same way as the side by side did." And in order, like, you could be ripping through the woods in the side by side, and it feels like you're going like 1,000 miles an hour, and you're doing like 45, 50. To get that same sensation in like my Ultra 4 car, you've got to be doing like $120. So there's that. I think there's that sort of like, it feels so cool because it's so small. But the bigger cars, I mean, I think it's just the you got to move them so much faster to get that same sensation inside of them.
That makes sense. And one thing I always kind of thought about was, out here in the East, we don't really have the space to open everything up super wide like that. So to get that same, high speed version of the sensation, I really think that, especially on the East Coast, we just get robbed of it. Unless you want to go to like a Dirty Turtle or something like that, where they have the design track for it. We just don't have the terrain for it. But rock crawling wise, just two totally different worlds.
Oh, I think so. It is. I mean, you take a side by side out, and then you take a Jeep or a crawler out. They're just two complete. Now I say that, and then this new Honda side by side that has like an actual transmission in it. Mm-hmm. Everyone I know that's driven that, they're like, it's a game changer because the drivetrain is so much similar to like a Jeep or something would be, because you've got gears, you can pick your gear, you can have low range with multiple gears, and so it might be different. But to me, it's when you crawl them, you almost have to crawl them like an IFS Ultra 4 car. You've got to you drive it completely different than you drive a Jeep, and and that's just the way it is. I think they're cool, but like you said, where they really shine, like when you go to King of the Hammers and Can-Am's got their trailer there with like 30 side-by-sides, and you can just walk up and just write your name on a list and get in one and bomb across the desert. That's where you're thinking, this is a pretty. It killed the sand car. Like nobody's building long travel sand cars anymore because that was $250,000, and you can spend 50 grand and have an amazing side by side in the desert. No questions asked.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. The trails out east here, I pick on adventure often because it goes from 0 to Captain Insane real quick, and it's just such a different perspective because the blue trails there are just these small rocks, but the black trails there are very serious. Have you seen the new trails like Little Caesars and Oatmeal Creek?
Yeah, we were out on the backside looking at Little Caesars, and I mean those are. I think that's the tricky part, right? So for these parks, it's a fine line where you want to have like trails for everyone to ride, but then you want to have like throw down buggy trails so you can have the rock bouncers come out because that brings a whole bunch of spectators out. Mm-hmm. So it's a tough mix, I think. And then when you think about it, a hill, you make a trail out of a hill that's like impossible to climb. That's not a very big trail versus if you want to do like a creek bed through somewhere, it's a lot more property you got to eat up to get that trail through. I'm excited to see Golden Mountain open back up because I thought it always had a good mix of those trails. So that's what I'm super excited about.
Now, for those who primarily wheel on the East Coast, how does that compare to a Moab or a Colorado trail, just in like scale and things like that? Because I mean, we think the rocks here are big, but I've heard Johnson Valley, the rocks are 5 times the size. It's just the traction that's the difference.
It's all it is traction, 100%. It's traction and perspective. So I mean, like you said, you go to AOP, some of those bouncer hills, they're insane. But if you roll off them, you're probably going to hit a tree on the way down. So you may get like one roll out maybe, and then you're going to get hung up in some timber. Whereas when you're out in like Moab, Colorado, not so much Colorado because it's got some big trees, but Johnson Valley, if you come off some stuff, you don't stop until you get all the way to the bottom. And it's all rock. So like when we flop here, you may lay over, you're going to land in some dirt, maybe some mud, some sand. You may hit a rock. When you roll in Johnson Valley, it's just painful because it's all rock all the way down. So every time the buggy flops or every time it rolls over on its side, it just shakes you, it just rattles your teeth every time you fall off a rock there. And then aside from that, it's just traction. I will say this, wheeling in Moab, I never worry that my rig is going to break. I don't, because there's so much traction. You can crawl everything. You can pick your line. You can be up on 2 wheels anywhere on the West Coast. And if it doesn't feel good, you can just hit the brakes and just stop and the car won't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. On the East Coast, when you're hitting big stuff here, you're always scared that you're going to break because in order to get up some of this stuff, it's like always full throttle, tires spinning, just hoping that you'll get traction somewhere, maybe bounce off a tree or clip a rock. And that's when something goes wrong. Like, in my head, I can just see the drive shafts underneath the truck. And I'm like, oh, I hope they don't come to the floor. That's all I ever hope for.
Yeah. We had an experience, me and my buddies, we had an experience like that at Hale Mountain. We had an old YJ with tons under it, and we got a flat. It was like he was on 42s and got a flat and ended up having a driveline issue. We ended up with a broken rear drive shaft that came through the floor and a front ring and pinion that snapped. And it was probably the worst day of my life because we actually ended up selling the Jeep on the side of the trail for like $800 because we were just like, we sat there for probably 5 or 6 hours trying to figure out how to do it, how to get it out. We've got a Unimog was floating around the trails, and like we were just in the woods enough where he tried to yank us out and he couldn't really get to us. So it was a terrible day. But
I think that's the other thing. I mean, the thing about a side-by-side is, even the big ones maybe weigh 2,400, 2,600 pounds. Right. I mean, you take a built 4-door JK on tons, if you're lucky, it weighs 6,000 pounds. It's probably closer to 7. when it's all said and done. That's a lot of weight to drag through the woods, when something goes wrong, to get it out. I've pulled out, this year at Hammers, I had to pull Holly and her big JK. It's got a big Dana 80 in the back, but I mean, I was pulling it up because she broke a U-joint on coming up the plaque line on sledge, and it's just a big truck to sort of pull through the rocks. It's work to get them out when they break, for sure.
So let's talk about the racing scene, because for those who don't remember, you built the Lambo bouncer. Was that the official name of it?
I think so. We call it Raging Bull. That's what we call it.
Raging Bull. Thank you. And it's actually my nice software here. Let's see here. I can pop us up a picture. How's that? So there's the bouncer for those who aren't familiar, but you actually came out to a Southern Rock race and you raced this bad boy. What do you think about the East Coast racing scene right now? Are the hills, or let me just start there. What do you think about the East Coast racing scene right now?
I love it. I love the rock bouncer stuff. I think it's super cool. It's you're comparing apples to oranges when you compare like Ultra 4 stuff to rock bouncing stuff. It's like comparing, endurance racing to drag racing.
Sure.
Drag racing is like, that to me is what rock bouncing is. It's short, it's quick. I think it's great because it's easy for people to watch. It's easy for people to see. I think that they can have a good time. They can just pull up. Whereas, I mean, if you try to go to King of the Hammers is hard to watch as a spectator. It's better to stay home. I mean, that's just the truth behind it. And as a matter of fact, when you go to King of the Hammers, when we work the live stream, we're up on stage, there's probably 100 people sitting on lawn chairs watching the Jumbotron in the middle of the desert when they could just be sitting at home getting the same thing, because there's no way to watch it. It's very, very hard. So I love the East Coast racing. I do miss. Do you remember the E-Course race? Remember E-Course racing?
Yeah,
I love those races. I would love to see some of that stuff come back, because I think that was lots of fun for sure.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because the technology, I interview a lot of the bouncer guys. The technology in these machines are just moving at such a high pace rate. Obviously, Tim Cameron's probably in the front on the technology side in terms of the new IFS car he has from Triton Engineering, that whole bulkhead. Do you think that car, I mean, is that where rock bouncers are headed, or is the old tried and true solid axle front and rear? What do you think about all that?
I think it depends on the driver. I think the solid axle car can definitely still perform well. I mean, if you look at some of the stuff that Jake Berkey and those guys are building down at Busted Knuckle and the horsepower they're throwing at it, I think the difference is I think what will happen is at some point in time, I think somebody is going to build a rock bouncer they're going to realize, they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, I need this chassis to just last like 4 races. Mm-hmm. And if you look at an Ultra 4 car, like if you de-skin an Ultra 4 car, there's no tubing there. Like, especially if you look at some of the Camel cars, some of their cars, you would look at it and say, there's not a lot of stuff there. Well, bouncers are heavy, and that's why the horsepower goes so high. But if you have a 6,800 or 6,500 pound bouncer, and then you have 1,800 horsepower, well, that's a lot of wear and tear on parts. I think what's going to happen is I think someone's going to start chasing the light end of the scale. And Travis Lovett did it for a while. Him and I talked about it. He was like, lighter's faster, lighter's faster. And he was scaling his rigs down for a while and trying to chase that lightness. And I think that's what we're going to see next. I think you'll sort of see that transformation from all the crazy tubing, which makes them look cool, which I think is awesome. But at the same time, if you're really going after just the race, you would go in there and say, I'm just going to build something that has just enough tube so I'll live. And if something bad happens, and I'm going to make it incredibly light. And that'll be the bouncer that sort of changes things. I don't know if IFS is going to be a huge deal, because when you talk to some of the, like even the Ultra 4 guys, they'll tell you IFS in the rocks is not better than a solid axle car. I think and then it's also, part of it's also on some of the sanctioning bodies, right? Like some of the guys make those trails pretty easy. They're a sandhill climb, right? Where an IFS car is going to do really, really well. But if you throw a bunch of rocks and some turns in there, That's where you're going to have to add rear steer, or a solid axle car will always turn tighter than an IFS car all day long.
So that was kind of the trap that I was walking that question into, because I ask a lot of the racers, what do you think of the race courses? Are they picking the right hills? And a lot of them are telling me, this is a drag race, fastest to the top. It's not. They've strayed so far from the whole bounty hill idea that they're more doing a drag hill. And after my digging and interviews with these guys, it really comes down to where can spectators come watch? Can they get the spectators there? And then can they keep everybody safe? And, in the event of bad situation, can they get, an ambulance or what have you back into where they are? So I wanted to pick your brain about it, and it's not an easy question, and I'm not sure that there's an answer, but, it's a very interesting time as a fan to see them run the same hills over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because I get it, because I've seen that and I've watched them all, right? I mean, we chased that bounty hill for so long where it was it's like you make the bounty hill so hard that nobody's going to climb it, but if someone does, it's a huge payout. Well, the fans don't like watching that because recovery takes so long.
Yeah.
I think the way I kind of like how you've got some of the races now where there's a jump at the bottom and a turn. I like those. I like the ones where, it's up and then maybe back down and back up again. I think those are interesting. I think the side-by-side stuff, I think is incredibly fun to watch, but I think it's dangerous as all get out. But it's the same thing. It's that whole spectator thing, right? You want people to be able to watch it and to get them there and to get people out if something bad happens. But I think to me, I think it's going to boil down to when you look at if you go look at some of the XRA stuff, what they did back in the day was they had like two races would go on, and then if something happened on one, they had like a couple race courses built in at one time. So you could do that on a bounty hill where a guy runs a bounty hill, maybe have two hills, and you got to run them both. But when this guy's getting recovered over here, you can have another race going on over here. I think there's ways to do it, but it's tricky because
that's a great idea that I hadn't heard of or thought about. That's excellent.
Yeah, because that's what it boils down to is you have to have stuff for people to watch, or they're not going to stand out in the middle of the forest and watch guy. Because you've seen some of those recoveries, some of those AOP hills. I mean, they're terrible. The recovery is an hour on some of those hills. It's just terrible.
Yeah. And a lot of that goes into, the fact that those hills are as unclimbable as they are. You fall back and all of a sudden you're between a rock, a tree, another hard place, and you're upside down. And it's, it does truly take an hour.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
And it makes it cool when somebody climbs it. But, I also liked when SRS for a little while, they do the race and then they'd have a bounty hill. At the end where some people can hit it if they wanted to or not. And Bobby was always up to hit that hill, no questions asked. So I think there's a good mix. I think it would be cool to see the series sort of, if someone took like a bouncer series, whoever it is, and mixed it up a little bit. Like I kind of liked Ultra 4 when it was considered King of the Hammers before it was Ultra 4. It was considered the Super Bowl of off-road racing. So you came with your Wee Rock car or your XRA car, and that was back when people weren't building Ultra 4 cars. It didn't exist yet. So I think it'd be cool if someone made an East Coast series where it was like, hey, this race is a hill climb. This one is something that's a little bit different. Maybe it's like a mega truck thing, and the goal is to build one vehicle to do all of those things. It has to be the same vehicle type of thing. I like when stuff like that happens. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. And an easy one to, I say, pick on in the most respectful regard is the Gold Rush buggy. I mean, its main issue that it's had this year is the fact that, and it's the 1600 horsepower bouncer from Berkey and them. Main issue is that it has sat at the bottom of the hills waiting in previous races, and the reason it had issues and was unable to finish, got DNFs, was because it couldn't run for that long.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think it would be really cool to have, if there's 10 races in the series, 3 of those races are 2-mile loops, and they have a hill climb in them and something, just so that people have to be able to do it. Because again, when you're building just a drag car, if you're really good at one thing, that can be boring.
I mean, you look at some of those dedicated drag cars. I mean, they don't even run a cooling system. You know, that's just, there's no cooling system at all to save weight, and the motor is just a billet block of aluminum, and you just put a whole bunch of power through it. And then you know, when you look at stuff like Hot Rod Drag Week, you know, you can't take that car on Hot Rod Drag Week because you got to drive it on the street. To me, I like Holly LS Fest has a super cool class where it's like you've got to drag race, and then you got to road race, and then you have to go on a cruise, and then you have to do something else. I can't remember if it's a slalom or maybe the one of those parking lot things. To me, that's cool. To me, that's why I like things like Ultimate Adventure and all that kind of stuff, because I love the fact that, I mean, you're taking a vehicle and you abuse it off-road and then drop onto the highway and drive it to the next trail and then abuse it off-road. That's what I love what Matt at Busted Knuckles doing with his sort of trail riding series with that JK. I think it's great to see that, because to me, I mean, that's also attainable, right? If someone's not going to go out and buy a bouncer, that's a very small market. But if someone's like, hey, I can get a Jeep and I can drive it to work, and then I can go hit some trails and have some fun, and then drive it over here and hit another trail, I think that makes the vehicle definitely worth the money that you're going to invest in it, instead of having an $80,000 drag car that sits on a trailer most of the time, you know?
I very much agree with you. And I think that whole mentality of what you just said, it shines through in all your work, because you build cars that can not only go hit the hardest trail in the park, but also that can get you to and from the trail. So I think that's one really, in my opinion, you have kind of kept alive. I think I used to have that mentality because I was in the Jeep world a little bit more, but now being in side-by-sides, I don't even think about it. I'm like, if I total it, it goes on the trailer, and I go in the garage, and I cannot think about it for a couple of days. But I very much I agree, and I think you're on. I think you're on with that. But you mentioned Ultra 4. You mentioned King of Hammers. Obviously, you are an integral part of that race. You are the voice that we all get to hear, which is really, really cool. You do a phenomenal job. And also, shout out to the media team, where we can see everything that's happening in the desert. That is an amazing feat on its own. But what did you think of this year's 4,400 race?
I thought it was cool. I think it's getting, and Dave Cole will hate, and this will guarantee that it'll be near impossible next year. I think the race course itself is getting a little easier because the drivers are coming back pretty fast. Yeah. I think also the fact that someone entered a Can-Am UTV and finished top 15, that's not a good sign for the 4,400 guys, that somebody can, you know, he's a phenomenal driver and it's a good machine, but that shouldn't happen in 4,400. That just shouldn't be allowed. But I thought the race itself was great. I like that there's a new king. I was getting tired of the same people winning it over and over and over again. So I'm glad that someone else won it. I'm glad that a solid axle car won it. I'm always happy when solid axle cars win it, because I think even though that's a $250,000 solid axle car, it's still, when people look at it, they're like, oh, that's I could build a rock car like that. So it's attainable for them. But I think the race itself was pretty epic, because it was just changing leads every 30 seconds. You know,
if you ever get first place, you had a curse.
We made that joke. We said we got to stop announcing that we have a new leader, because the minute that we said physically leading the race, they were over fixing their junk on the side of the trail. So
so let me say this: you hit all three of my talking points in your answer there. First off, the 4,400 race, you're exactly right. Probably the most entertaining it's been in the past 4 or 5 years, in my opinion. It was awesome. You guys did. I mean, not only was the race great, obviously the carnage is as a spectator, the carnage is just that, like, you know, the drama in all of it. But the commentary was great. The media was great. The actual coverage was awesome. So, you know, my hat goes off to all of you guys and Ultra 4. But I think you're right. So I'm a side-by-side guy, and I interviewed Hunter Miller, and I got his take on it. And I actually interviewed Jay Calloway, who started either on the line behind Cody Miller, who ran the Can-Am, or he started with Cody. And he said, basically, he was the first one that brought it to my attention. It's a gigantic safety issue, and then we'll talk about the course piece of it. But he was like, man, it was so cool to be on this guy and just like running with him through the desert. He was like, it was like nothing. And he was like, you know, I was kind of keeping my eye on him, making sure. But he said as soon as he went to Cougar Buttes, he would drop down and Cody would go over and he'd be like, I can't go because I don't see him. If I go over and I crush him, he was like, I'm gonna never forgive myself. And he basically said that he, out of pure sportsmanship, couldn't drive the race that he wanted to race, and obviously he ended up having some bad luck. It's King of Hammers. That's what happens. But I don't know from a safety perspective if I think if a UTV should be in the 4400 class. Now here's the caveat. It's his own machine. It's his life. He should, if he wants to race it, let him race. There's a lot of people that want to jump off buildings. We don't let them. Okay? So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think to me, I understand the theory behind it, but at the end of the day, I think when you look at like score, they put UTVs out there with trophy trucks, and a trophy truck is a hell of a lot faster and can do a hell of a lot more damage than an Ultra 4 car could do and they even put motorbikes and quads out in front of those things. So I think it's, and I mean, yeah, it's a UTV, but that thing was not a stock UTV anyways, So, I mean, do I think a stock UTV should be out there? Absolutely not. But that thing was chassis, and they'll say, oh no, it was a stock Can-Am. It was not a stock Can-Am. There was so many modifications done to that thing. It was probably as well built as an Ultra 4 car. I think what is the deciding factor on that is the rule in Ultra 4 is there's the race course and you have to be within 50 feet of it. And 50 feet is a long way when you're in some of those rock trails. And I think a lot of people take a lot of bypasses in those races. So I think what we'll see next year is I think they will either make the 4400 class either really long, so they may go like 300 miles with it and just say we'll do 300-mile race next year, or they're going to throw some more serious rock trails and tighten up they're called VCPs or virtual checkpoints. You don't get to see them. They're basically just like virtual gates that you have to drive through. I think it may be interesting even as a spectator if they took some of the iconic spots at the Hammers and made them run it again. Like make them go up sledge and make them run the plaque line. Put a VCP in the middle of sledge and even put 2 flags up there and say you've got to run it. But at the same time, they want to, when they do those multiple lap races, they get worried about guys getting in traffic and doing something stupid, and it's a dance out there for sure. But I think you're going to see a lot harder UTV race next year, and I think you'll see a lot harder Ultra 4 race for sure. No questions asked.
I mean, that's the move they have to do to stay the reputation it has, and not only that, but it's the Hammers. You have every tool in your tool belt sitting on it. Use them, and I don't know. It's the hardest race in the world, right? So let's make it the
hardest one day race in North America. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, there we go.
I think there's ways you could get back to that. I know why they qualify. I don't like qualifying. I like it better when it was like the luck of the draw. Because to me, those are. I mean, but even this year, it was super cool to see Raul come from dead last in that car. End up in second place. Those are the stories I think that make super cool, Ultra 4 lore type of thing. But I think, I think you could throw some big rock trails in there and make people run the big rock trails, or just make it, go up back door, not down back door. Maybe do back door 2 or 3 times. But then that traffic issue comes into play as well. And we've seen and it's racing. We've seen some people make some stupid mistakes when they get in traffic. We saw Miller drive over. He drove over himself with his own car this year when he was in the middle of that race. So it's tricky. I mean, but I think I think there's enough criticism coming out of it this year. It's also just the place is ridden more. I mean, Hammers used to be only ridden a couple times a year. Now guys go out there every weekend type of thing. Yeah. So there's more traffic. It's just back down.
Yeah, and you hit my next point too, which was backdoor. It seems, I understand the traffic jam side of things, and I'm sure that there's a way that you could parse people out. Maybe the first 10 that qualify have to hit backdoor on the first lap, and then you move it down, because eventually it thins out. I don't know how. Again, pulling that out of thin air, so we'll see how it pans. But to not go up backdoor in the 4,400 class, first off, that lets the UTV finish. Or not necessarily finish, but that's a real deterrent for a UTV. But also, one of the most iconic scenes you can ever see is Shannon Campbell in the Campbell car screaming up that, there's these classic images you have in your head. And not that you get robbed of them by any means in the negative sense, but it's just such a staple of the race that I was surprised that they wouldn't have been going up.
I think it's just a matter of the rate, want to make the race course different every single year, because last year, not 2020, but 2019 February, they did go up backdoor. They had to go up backdoor one time. So I think it's that combination. I would like to see them throw some of the classic trails back in there. I'd like to see them put sledge back in, but then it's also, it's tough because you've got these guys out there racing. And it's also a communications issue, because until you're out there, you don't realize how hard it is to even talk to your pit when you're in the race. Yeah. So you've got guys who are still on lap 1 and guys coming up on them on lap 2 and not letting them get around them in the rock trails when you should just let them by. But there's that racer's mentality, right? Of I don't want to let this guy pass me because then he's in front of me. Well, they're already a whole lap in front of you. Just let them by. And that's when you see people make really, really. There's that, I remember Tom Ways, probably about 4 years ago, went up. He didn't even go up backdoor. He went right and took this crazy high line and dropped in and drove over a guy's winch line, and the guy's throwing a rock at him and he's driving away. And but that's King of the Hammers, man. It used to be the rule was if someone's in front of you, Dave Cole used to say, if that person's in front of you, consider their car a rock and drive over it. That was just considered part of the game.
Now, does he not consider that now?
I think it's probably an unspoken word. Now you're supposed to wait for permission to drive over it, because Ultra 4 was pretty fast and loose when it first started. When the year that we raced it, the rule book was 5 pages. Now it's 300 pages. And I think that comes with insurance, and it comes with more eyeballs on it, and it comes with more people seeing it and being involved in it, and it's riskier, and it's not 90 people on the lake bed. Like the year that we raced it back in 2009, 2010, you'd go out there, there was only the racers were out there. That was it. There were no spectators. There's a few people came out and watched the race, but not a lot. Now it's 75,000 people in the desert. So there's a whole other logistical nightmare to worry about than whether or not you can let somebody pass somebody in the rocks type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It really is.
So do you, I think that you have that's a very comprehensive and apt analysis of King of Hammers. Do you think that we'll have the rest of the Ultra 4 season?
I think they'll come back in the fall. I think what's going to happen is, I saw a couple announcements the other day. I know they canceled a race in California, and then they were talking about leaving the rest of the races okay, but then the points issue became a problem with which race they wanted to cancel on the East Coast. I think what's going to happen across the country, and this is just the way that this country is, the minute we're open, Tennessee's open back up now,
right.
And I drove by Waffle House, and there was not a parking spot in the whole place. So I think that the minute that everything's opened, all the stuff that got canceled between January and June is going to be rescheduled between July and December. So I think in the falls, it's going to be, everything is just going to push through no matter what. And that's just the way people are. That's the human nature of Americans. It's a freedom-loving country and a freedom-loving people, and they want to get out and do stuff. And so I think we're going to see every event, every race, it's just all going to happen in the back half of the year.
I think you're exactly right. I think that once everyone, Rick is actually chiming in on the Facebook side. Renegade Racing actually has a race this Saturday at Adventure Off-Road Park. I think once someone sees one person poke their head out and see kind of how it goes and what happens, I think that's when, especially around here, and around here, I think Renegade will have their event. If it goes well, everybody else will kind of start creeping back in and opening their schedules back up. And I think it'll probably be the same for Ultra 4. Somebody's just got to do it first, or they're going to do a small stab and see how it works out. And then I agree with you. I think all the events will be rescheduled for either the corrected, initial dates, or sometimes slammed in there somehow.
Yeah, I think the part that's tricky with Ultra 4 is, I mean, you're dealing with California, which is tough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just of course things are different in California, because it's like there's as many people in California as there is the entire country of Canada. It's a huge population. It's a densely populated state. And you look at states like Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia, it's not like that. There's not as many people crammed into these spaces. So I think, because I talk to friends all over the world, because we have friends that live everywhere, and they're like, I can't believe you're opening back up. I'm like, come on. Yes, Italy, but it's this big. Italy's like Tennessee. You have to look at this whole thing and look at America as 50 little individual countries, and each one of them has to make the decision that's right for them. And I think you're right. Down here, I think you're just going to see it open back up, and you'll see some people will make some decisions to whether to come out or not, and that's their choice. That's just the reality,
Yeah. So with that, though, if you choose not to come out, Ian has, again, we're going to reiterate, 2 different shows going right now. Tell me a little bit about the projects you're working on right now, and is there one that's most exciting to you?
Yeah, so we start shooting with Motor Trend next week, and I'm bringing back the little Suzuki that I had originally built a long time ago. It's called, it was just basically the green Zook. I'd rebuilt it like 17 times. I sold that to a buddy of mine, and then we were looking for just some odd projects for this year, and he bent a rod in the motor, so we're doing engine swap in the Zook, which will be fun because I love that rig. It's so much fun to drive. And then we've got JK 2-door stretch that we're going to start on that show.
Cool.
For that one, so we're doing the 2-door, the Jeep Works stretch kit. So we're going to do that on a JK. And then I got a cab truck. So last year I built the Goat Build LJ, which was like a combination of a Jeep and an Ultra 4 car sort of smashed together. And so this year I'm going to build a cab truck, and I'm going to try to take a Ultra 4 or not Ultra 4, take a rock bouncer and an Expedition travel rig, and I'm going to try and squish them together and see what happens. So we'll see what comes out of that, but that'll be a fun one for sure.
That's awesome. Also, did Jimmy from Essentially Off-Road have that Zook?
Yeah, okay. He still does. It's still his. He bought it years ago, and sort of I've told him, I was like, you buy this, but don't ever sell it. That's the deal.
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell the production company to sell it to you. And so he bought it, and he's like, I'm never going to sell it. Don't worry about it. And but he brought it to Moab and bent a rod in Moab, and so he had just been sitting at his house. So we're doing it's another diesel TDI Jetta, but we're moving newer. We're going to the electronic instead of the mechanically injected diesel.
Very nice. I've seen that in person, and it's so funny because first off, you look at it and you're like, I know that. I've seen it. And then you look at it and you're like, there's this back and dense and refined. It's only what needs to be there is there. And
I think it weighs like 2,600 pounds is what it weighs when you're ready to go wheeling. And it's just so much. And the best story I have with that is Jimmy brought it out to Moab one year, and we were going up Moab Rim, and he was just messing around, and he just started climbing up stuff, just not even thinking about it. And he throws it up on a rock, and he rolled it. But the thing is so light that when he rolled it, when it hit the side of the tires, it stopped rolling. So it just rolled onto its 2 sidewalls and then stopped. And he was sitting in front of me, and I watched the thing and just flopped onto its side. And then I watched him sort of shake his head a little bit, put it in reverse, turn the wheel, and just whipped it back up onto its tires again, and kept going up the trail because it's just so much fun.
That is absolutely awesome. So you mentioned kind of the selling off process with the production and things like that. This is a question I'm sure you get a ton of times. All these cars that you've worked on, the projects, everything like that, when you're done with them or you guys choose not to move forward on them anymore, what happens to them?
So back in the days of Extreme 4x4 and Extreme Off-Road, those were all owned by the production company. And when the original owners of RTM, Joe and Patty, they were really cool because they would just say to me, we don't want to just sell this to anybody, because some of this stuff was pretty crazy. They said, we want to sell it to people that you know and you trust. So Jimmy bought a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then he would sometimes keep them, sometimes take them apart. Sometimes and then we sold a couple, like Van Woolivert out of Woolies. He's got one of them. Some companies bought them to use as promo vehicles and stuff like that. So that was that show. The deal with Motor Trend was, when we signed the deal with them to do four-wheeler, one of the caveats was, I said, I'll do it as long as, if I want the cars, I want to keep all the cars. And they said, we don't care what happens to the cars. We don't care about the cars. Whatever you want to do with the cars, do it. So everything that lands on Motor Trend, probably there's a couple that I don't own, but like the Zook and this JK we're doing actually for Rock Crawler. But everyone else that rolls through here, like I saw the Goat Build LJ back there, and the little stretch razor still back there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I keep them all, and then it's a sickness I have, because I have those, and then I still have the 715 from the old show. I kept it. I still have, and then I've got everyone that I'm building for myself right now too. So I think it's like 13 cars right now, 13 off-road cars. It's silly but the bad part is the worst part of it is I'll think about a car and I'll be like, oh, I only ever maintain them when they're about to go somewhere. So I'll like pull it in and be like, oh, I got to rebuild the axle on this one, or I got to do this. But then aside from that, 9 times out of 10, I'm just like, I'll just build another one. It's easier to build another one. So we just start build another one as we go. So it's a sickness, but I'm lucky that my wife doesn't make me get rid of them. She's cool with it. So I just get to keep collecting them as we go, kind of thing, which is good.
Yeah, that's a really, really cool deal, not only with your wife, but that's also a really cool deal that you have struck up with the current production company. So good for you. One thing I want to ask, I'm going to make a little side note here. That Goat Built chassis, you did I think it was like a 4-seat buggy that you had built out, and you put like a little Jeep. Dude, one of my absolute favorites. And I think that was probably one where I was probably 19, and I was like, I'm saving my money. I'm going to order one of these. I'm going to weld it out, and I was going to do the whole 9 yards. Bought a razor instead. Save myself some headache. so that wasn't a bad choice by any means. But Mayhem Off-Road Park, is that still a thing?
I think you can get in there. I think Marvin will let you in. But I don't think you can still. I love riding there because it had a couple of really good creek trails and then a couple of really good hill climbs as well that weren't like super nasty. Mm-hmm. But I think you can still get in if Marvin lets you, but it's not like open to the public kind of deal.
Yeah. So I'm learning about all these places around here, and it's like half of them, I don't know if this is a real place where you can go ride, and that's a lot of like southeast wheeling for those who are West Coast, or we have a big group of people that listen from Australia. I don't know how it is out there, but West Coast, it's all public, land that is owned by the government and things like that. So not that way here, but I was always been curious. I've heard of Mayhem for a long time and never known really much about it.
It was a great park too, because it had some really good hills and a couple really good trails, and it was super convenient because literally you just parked the trailer and you were on the hill kind of thing. So it was super good. But I mean when you go west, the West Coast guys are spoiled because so much of their land is government land that you can it's just open. I mean, that's the craziest part. It's just like, oh, I wonder what's at the top of that mountain. I guess I'll drive my truck up there and find out. It's just so easy because if it's just government land, just drive on up there and see what's going on, and then some of the razor stuff out there. I mean, I was out in Colorado, just driving through, and there was like a railway track that was just sort of like following the mountain. But there were no railway tracks on it anymore. But it was just side by sides driving, and it like followed the river. And I was like, that would be a pretty bad trip to be on because that'd be fun. Yeah. But the problem they have is their states aren't as lenient with making them street legal. So it's harder to play that game, right? I think it's super cool that they're street legal around here, and then I think in places like Moab, I think it's almost a necessity. But I think it's smart that they did that for sure because I know the manufacturers aren't fond on that, but I think it's at least able to drive on the road to get from trail to trail. I think it's good.
Yeah, I know that's one of the big things so there's like three things that I've taken away from your show, and I bring them up, or every single time I'm wheeling, I think about them. One of which is you explained how a tire size, so say for example, you have a 37, and you did a measurement of like, if you're over halfway on the tire, it'll actually try to dig under. I can't tell you how many times I look at a ledge and I'm like, my tire's going to try to climb under that. And I literally hear you in my head giving the explanation. It is crazy. Also, the explanation on a limit strap in the front, like right on top of the differential,
Yeah,
how
seven out.
it unloads. Man, I had a discussion about that last week. And the other one is just in general trail riding. You actually built an overlanding Tacoma with hot water and a shower and stuff. And dude, that right there, I think about that all the time because I'm like, I'm a software engineer, and some days I sit at my desk too long, and I'm like, I'm going to build a truck, I'm going to go in the woods, and no one's going to ever hear from me again. And
Yeah, I've got a Ram Charger right now. That's what we're putting together for it. It's like a little expedition travel thing, just because I think some of that stuff. I mean, when you go out and just some of those, like, not always hitting the hardcore trails, just going out and having fun. I think it's definitely a good time just to go out and just like do a little bit of camping, do a little bit of wheeling. To me, that's a completely different part of the sport, which is so much fun. Mm-hmm. And I really like that. I think that's super cool. And it's a different world. I mean, that all expedition travel stuff. I mean, I went to the Four-Wheeler Adventure Expo in wherever it was, Southern California, right before all this virus stuff went crazy. Man, it's crazy. Like the stuff that's there, and people with their kitchen set up and they're cooking and they got a motorcycle, and I was just like, man, it's pretty neat. It's a whole other part, and that's what makes off-roading so cool, right? There's so many different kinds of it. There's Baja, there's Ultra 4, there's rock bouncing, there's trail riding, there's jeeping, there's adventure expedition travel, there's tons of stuff. There's so many different parts of the same genre. I think that makes it really, really cool, because not a lot of other motorsports are like that,
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. One thing I've always been curious is when you have the Jeeps and you have the full size, and you're going through places like Windrock, Brimstone, Royal Blue, all that stuff. Have you guys ever thought about doing, a 2-day trek straight through and then going up maybe to, the Kentucky, Virginia side of things? I would love to watch, or even, just watch over social media. Some of you guys, like I think Matt did the Trail to SEMA. Something like that, where you guys go straight through Windrock and kind of map all that TWRA stuff out and just say, hey, this is where we're going, and do the East Coast version of a Trail to SEMA.
Certainly would be fun. I mean, I think there's a lot of East Coast stuff that people just don't even know about. There's some stuff just like, and it's some stuff that I don't even know about. Like Ricky did that overland adventure thing not too long ago. And I watched it, and he went on that, and I was like, man, that's just so cool. I think, we did the whiskey trips, and then this year we did the one with Four-Wheeler. We're doing one again this year, but we're going to go to a barbecue festivals where we're going to end. So I think we're going to start somewhere else and do some other riding. But yeah, I think it'd be cool to do some like legit, like stay in the dirt for as long as you can kind of stuff. It's harder on the East Coast because there's so much private property involved. The West Coast, it's so easy because you just stay off the road and you can stay in the dust for so long, type of thing. So, but it certainly would be cool. It's a good idea. Maybe I'll steal it.
Yeah. So Hubert Rowland from Nitro Circus, he actually
he the coast to coast.
Yeah. So that is where I had him on a couple times, and he actually lives just down the road from me. And man, I talked to him, and I'm like, how do you even prepare for this? How do you do this? And we actually had, I think we have 3 episodes with him. It's 5.5 hours. Hubert can talk. Everybody that knows Hubert will talk for a while. And I mean that with the most love. But yeah, man, he detailed it out. It's a really, really cool thing. But something like that, where you do, a big chunk of the country, maybe not the country, but like a couple days, I think is something doable. And I've always wanted to see it done with full-size rigs, where, they try and stay more on the trails or country roads at least than taking the highways. Because I know like Mel Wade at Off-Road Evolution, he does the JK experience, and those are really great, but they do a lot of highway miles. And I think it'd be really cool to see people go, straight through mostly trail stuff.
Yeah, it was good. That like Ultimate Adventure, they try to stay off
Yeah.
interstates and they just do regular back roads and stuff. And I mean, when we went up and did Maine and Pennsylvania and stuff like that, we did a lot of roads and a lot of back roads and stuff, which was fun. But it is, like I said, it's tricky on the East Coast just linking that stuff together, trying to figure it out. But it's definitely doable, and it could be tons of fun for sure. I think Ricky just went on one like himself not too long ago, where he just did like a little bachelor party ride with his Jeep up somewhere. So he may have an idea of where to go for sure, which would be cool because he's always kind of out poking around looking for stuff to do, which is neat.
Yeah, I actually met Ricky about a month or two ago. So we've been riding razors here and there. So it's been nice to meet him. And that's Ricky Berry over at RCV Performance. So he's a good guy to follow on Instagram and all that kind of fun stuff. But one more thing, and someone actually asked me to bring this up to you. You built a big S10 cab truck, bright lime green,
Yep.
and one, I don't remember if he was a viewer or how you guys got in touch, but he actually built a scale replica.
Yep.
I don't know if you've seen the RC rock bouncing scene and all the kind of explosion of that market. Has that ever interested you as just a little side project to kick around?
I did a couple RC things when my son was younger. And it's fun and stuff. I don't get into it as hardcore as some of the guys get into it. It blows my mind. Like some of the stuff, because we used to get all the emails and stuff and invites out. And there was one scale expo thing that we were looked into at one point in time where like it was like legit like rules. If you rolled it, you couldn't reach down and pick it up yourself. You had to get another winch line over to hook onto it and pull it over and stuff. Yeah, it's super cool. I get too excited about how fast they go, and I take them out and rip them around and smash into things and all that kind of stuff. But I think they're super cool, and I love the scale stuff. It blows my mind how detailed some of these things get for sure. Some of the stuff, like when you see some of the stuff on social media, like on Instagram, you'll see a picture and it's like, wait a minute, is that an RC or is that a real vehicle? Because some of them are pretty cool for sure.
Yeah. So with that, I got just a couple like rattle off questions here. The first one, what's your favorite rig you've ever built, and why?
Probably right now, probably the 715. If that's the one that's my favorite, because it was just like all the stars aligned to get that one. It literally, we kind of faked finding it in the junkyard for TV, but that's literally where it came from. Someone dragged it across the scales and sold it for scrap, and it's just, it's super rare vehicle. They only built like 68,000 of them, and then the cool part was I met the guy who worked in Birmingham, who didn't buy it, but he worked for emergency management in Birmingham that got it from the U.S. military. So I was able to meet the guy that had worked for the government who ended up putting that as a Forest Service truck in Birmingham, which was super cool. So I think it was definitely, that's probably up there at the top of my list of my favorites for sure. So
now, is this car still leaf sprung?
Oh yeah, leaf springs all the way. Yeah, 100%. Really? Yep, that's it. Yeah, you can't have a 1968 M715 and put it on coilovers. That's just wrong. So so it's leaf sprung all the way around. Yeah, and I love that thing. It's Hemi, 545 RFE, range box into a 205, 14 bolt rear, 60 front, leaf springs all the way around. And it just worked. It works so great in Moab. It's a perfect Moab truck. It's a little big to wheel on the East Coast. It's a big truck. Those things are bigger than a full size truck. So the trees come out and get it, which is why I don't wheel it a lot on the East Coast. I kind of stick it just out to the West Coast for sure.
All right, I got one last question, and this was one I got more than once. How do you style the hair?
There was on my YouTube channel an actual how I style my hair video at one point in time, but it takes like five seconds. I just put all the spiker in my hair and just stick it all up like that, and away we go. So it's a little long right now because I haven't been able to get it cut. I got to try to get it cut before next week, but there's nobody cutting hair right now. So, it's quick and easy.
I actually remember seeing that video. I wish I had the time to find it, but it's on there. I think it's on your Instagram. You may have to do some real good searching, but it's definitely on there. And it is pretty funny because your hair goes from completely normal, like just completely down, to all. It's like boom, it's up and it's ready and it's there.
straight up and we're ready to go. Yep, that's the way it works.
Yeah, buddy.
Man. And I can tell how old you are by how, so like if someone says, you remind me of Syndrome from The Incredibles, then they're like, 20 to 30 years old. If they say that I remind them of Heat Miser from, that's an old show that I watched as a kid, then you're like my age. Then you're like 45 years old, 45 years old.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
No, I think we covered a lot of stuff. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I had an absolute blast. What we'll do is we'll close out here, and then we'll stay and chat for a second after the broadcast closes. But thank you for your time. Anybody you need to give a shout out to, anything like that?
No, I'm good. I think we covered everybody we need to shout out to. So.
All right, perfect. Ian, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you in just a moment.
Perfect.